Okay, so for number 14, the first thing you want to do is graph the function and y equals. Although you could probably answer some of those questions without it. So x to the 6th minus 4x to the 4th plus 2x cubed minus 8x squared minus 15x minus 20. Yeah? And what did you change your window to? The graph has negative 4 to 4, right? So I'm going to go negative 4 to 4 on the x. What does the y go from? Negative 100 to 60. And then we graph, and we get that. Yeah? Okay. Now on the picture of the problems worked out, I've named like all the names. Close your computer, hon. I've named all the names of the different types and the number of terms. Monomial, binomial, trinomial, constant, linear, quadratic, cubic, quartic, quintic, and polynomial of degree higher than 5. You just say polynomial degree 6, right? So what's the name of this right here? What's the degree? What's the degree? 6. The degree is 6, so we say polynomial of degree 6. That was a terrible E. Of degree 6 with what? How many terms? With 6 terms. If it was a quadratic with 3 terms, then we would say quadratic trinomial, right? But that's a lot bigger than that. Domain. What does domain represent? Or what's it determining? Left and right. So how far to the left and how far to the right does this go? All real numbers. It goes all the way left, all the way to the right. All polynomials do. Range. What's the lowest it goes? Do we know that yet? We don't. The lowest it goes is whatever that minimum is, and the highest it goes is infinity, right? So it's some number up to positive infinity, right? Well, we'll find that out. Okay, the only way I can know that is if I find the what? Find the minimum. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and keep answering what we have up here. It says limits. Do you understand what it means when it says limits? Okay. As x goes to negative infinity, y goes to what? So as x goes to negative infinity, where's y going? Up to positive infinity. And as x goes to positive infinity, which means going to the right, where's y going to? Positive as well. How many options do we have for those? We only have 2, positive and negative. How many options of combinations do we have? 4. Even functions do what? They both go in the same direction. So if it's positive leading coefficient, they both go up. If it's negative, they both go down. If it's odd, they go in opposite directions. If it's positive, they in general go up, and if it's negative, they in general go down. Okay? So they can do different things in the middle, but it'll start from above and go below. Okay. X-intercepts. What are x-intercepts? Where it crosses the x-axis. How many times does this cross the x-axis? 2 times. So we need to find both of those. How do we do that? We go to second, calculate. So second calc. 0? Yeah? Okay. Blinky-doos right there. Okay, this is at negative 1, negative 2. So somewhere between negative 3 and negative 2. So I'm just going to type in negative 3 is my left. Negative 2 is my right. Press enter. And I get this. How many decimals do I like? 3. So I'm going to write negative 2 point, well, in this case, yeah, negative 2.397. So negative 2.397. 0 is one of them. Second calculate, I want to find the next 0. It's between 2 and 3 as well, right? On the positive side. So 2 is my left, 3 is my right. Enter. Now guys, if you do left bound and right bound, remember left will be below it in this case and right will be above it. Whereas over here, left was above it and right was below it. Yeah? And 2.461. So 2.461, comma 0. Okay, do I need to look at the graph in order to know my y-intercept? Y-intercept is when what equals 0? when x equals 0. If x equals 0 in this equation, aren't all of these terms with x is gone? And you're just left with negative 20? And it's 0, negative 20. It's not wrong if you do that, but how do you find it in the calculator if you didn't remember that? Second calculate, you can find value. So if I press value, you know when x equals what? 0, y equals negative 20. Okay? Now the next thing I ask for is my relative minimum, or minimums. How many relative minimums do we have? 2. So second calculate min. This one here is around negative 2. So I'm going to go negative 2.5 on the left and negative 1.5 on the right. If you scroll and just like somewhere over here press enter, somewhere over here press enter, and then press enter again, that's fine. I just like typing it in. Okay, so I got negative 1.890 comma negative 39.189. And then I need to find the other one, yeah? So second calculate min, somewhere around close to 2, so 1.5 and 2.5. 1.825 and negative 69.289. So negative 1.825 and negative 69.289. I was just kidding. So it's positive. 1.825. My bad. Okay. And then relative maximum. Do we have a relative max? Right in here, right? So second calc max. Negative 1.25 and 0. And my max is at negative 0.607. Negative 0.607 and negative 14.783. Is it okay if you don't round? Guys, do I care if you don't round, if you just truncate? I don't care. If you just drop it off at 3 decimals, that's perfectly fine. If you round, that's perfectly fine. If you write something wrong, that's not perfectly fine. Okay? So either truncate or round, I don't really care. So the last part is interval increasing and decreasing. Do you remember what we need for those? The min and the max. Do we need the x's and the y? The x's or the y's? Okay, because a lot of people like to tell me the y's because they're like, well, obviously it's decreasing from up here down to this y value. But the question is, where are we increasing, where are we decreasing, right? So what I'd like you to do is draw dotted lines going through your min, your max, and your min. And then what would I like you to label at the bottom? The x values. So the x value of my first minimum is negative 189. What's the x value of my max? Negative 0.607. And the x value of the other minimum? 1.825. Okay, so here's what I know. Coming over here from negative infinity on the x and going all the way to positive infinity, my function is doing 4 different things. It starts off what? Reading from left to right, if you graph this, would it be increasing or decreasing here? Decreasing. So starting off, it's decreasing on this interval. And then what's it doing? Increasing on this interval. And then what's it doing? Decreasing on that interval. And then increasing over the rest, right? So, in here for increasing. Or I guess we could just start off with the first interval. Negative infinity to negative 1.89 is decreasing. So, negative infinity, negative 1.89. Do we use brackets on increasing and decreasing? No, because at the maxes and mins you are not in fact doing either one. You're stopped. Okay, pick back up at negative 1.89. and go to what? Negative 0.607? That's when we're increasing. On the next interval, negative 0.607 to 1.825, we are decreasing again. So negative 0.607, 1.825. And then on the last interval, from 1.825 to infinity, we are increasing. No, but I want it on your review so that you remember why. Okay? I remember breaking it up. Okay, so there's that one. Let's go to number 16. Oh yeah, I was just kidding. What is that lowest y value? Negative 69.289. Thank you for reminding me. So this is negative 69.289. So it's not enough to just look at the graph and be like, I think it's this. You got to find the exact. That looks really bad. Okay. On the next, hey, on any of these, if you want more practice, remember you can always look up the reviews and the completed reviews in these sections on iLearn. Okay, state the possible rational roots of the following polynomial and then use synthetic division in the given graph to find all rational roots. What does NC stand for? No calculator. Okay, do you remember how to find possible rational roots? Okay, perfect. What you do is you divide the factors of the, does anybody remember? Perfect. Factors of the constant, which is 14, divided by the factors of what? Now the reason I put the plus and minus is because a lot of people kind of forget that, but the leading coefficient. So the leading coefficient would be 6 in this case, right? So what are the factors of 14? What are the factors of 14? 1 and 14, 2 and 7. Now, that's the reason you need to remember the plus and minus, because it could be negative 1, negative 14, positive 1, positive 14, right? Okay. Yeah, and then what are the factors of 6? Good. 1, 2, 3, 6. We actually have to divide them, though, don't we? Okay, so plus and minus, and let's just start listing them out. Do you want to do all of them divided by 1 and then all of them divided by 2, or the first one divided by all the denominators? What do you want to do? The second option? Okay. 1 divided by 1 is what? 1 divided by 2 is 1/2. What's 1 divided by 3? And 1/6. Now we start with 2. 2 divided by 1 is 2. 2 divided by 2, we already have. 2 divided by 3, 2/3. 2 divided by 6, 1/3, which we already have. Then we do 7. 7 divided by 1, 7. 7 divided by 2, 7/2. 7/3 and 7/6. If it's odd and these are, well, it's prime, so those aren't going to divide out. And then we do what? 14. 14 divided by 1, 14. 14 divided by 2, 14 divided by 3. And then 14 divided by 6, 7/3, which we already have, so there we go. Okay. So if I asked you how many possible rational roots does this function have, what would you say? Would it be, so 24? Okay. So we have 24 options. And if you look at this graph over here, what do you think our options are going to be? Or what do you think the actual will be? I'm thinking -2 for sure. Yeah? What do you think about that one? Okay, I think you're talking about that one, right? Do y'all agree with him that it might be 7/2? What is 7/2 as a decimal? 3.5. And then you're saying 1/3? Okay. Which one is probably going to be the easiest to check first? Negative 2. So let's do negative 2 with synthetic division. What goes across? 6, negative 11, negative 39, and 14. Okay, drop down the 6. What's 2 times 6? Negative 12. What's negative 12 and negative 11 added together? Negative 23. What's 2 times 23? 46 is a negative times a negative. Positive. 46 minus 39? 7, and negative 2 times 7? Negative 14. All right. Now, at this point, you could solve that quadratic, but it might be easier to just go ahead and try and divide out 1/3. You know what I mean? So I'm going to try and divide out 1/3. If you have to divide out a fraction and if it doesn't start working out pretty quickly, then it's not going to work. Okay? So you're never going to end up with crazy stuff if it works. Bring down the 6. What's 1/3 of 6? 2. And remember, you can do that by multiplying top. 1 times 6 is 6. 6 divided by 3 is 2. Or just do that. What's negative 23 plus 2? Negative 21. And what's 1/3 of negative 21? Negative 7. I want to know all the zeros, right? Do you want to go ahead and set, well, okay, you could do two different things right now. You could go this route and say the power was 3, right? We divided out how many? 2. So this should be 6x to the 1 minus 21, set that equals 0 and solve. Or you can just go ahead and try 7/2 and see if it works. It doesn't really matter to me. Okay? If you try 7/2, we bring down the 6. Think about 7 divided by 2 times 6. What's 6 divided by 2? 3, and what's 7 times 3? 21, so it works, right? Okay, so could you tell me for sure what all 3 roots are? That's okay. Negative 2 and 7/2. Okay. So on the next one, 17, we got to do it again. So what are the factors of the constant? Okay, 1, 2, 3, and 6. Leading coefficient? 1, 2, and 4. The 2 repeats, so we don't need it twice. Let's start listing them out. 1 divided by 1 is 1, 1/2, and 1/4. And then what? 2 divided by 1 is 2, 2 divided by 2 is 1, 2 divided by 4 is 1/2, which we already have. 3 divided by 1 is 3, 3 divided by 2 is 3/2, we don't have that. And 3 divided by 4. And now we have 6. 6 divided by 1 is 6. 6 divided by 2? 6 divided by 4? 3/2. So we already have it. There we go. Okay, look at your options. What do you think they are? I mean, that's pretty clear. Negative 2, positive 1? Okay. So negative 2, positive 1. Be careful on scale. Make sure you know that that's 1. Okay, what do you want to do first, negative 2 or positive 1? It really doesn't matter. Keep in mind, though, that you don't have a calculator, so it might be easier to deal with the 1 first. Get the numbers down a little bit, but it doesn't really matter. 4, 4, negative 5, 3, and negative 6. What do you do if there's a missing power? You put 0 in its place. Good. Okay. Bring down the 4. What's 4 times 1? 4 plus 4? 1 times 8? 8 minus 5? 1 times 3 is 3 plus 3. 1 times 6 is 6, and you get 0. So now we try what? Negative 2. Negative 2 times 4? Negative 8, I get 0. What's negative 2 times 0? 0. 3 plus 0 is 3. Negative 2 times 3, and I get 0. What power did we start with? We started with a power of 4. We divided out 2 roots, so what power are we left with? So 4x squared plus 0x plus 3 equals 0. And we need to solve, right? What would you do to start solving that equation? Subtract 3. 4x squared equals a negative 3. What do we do next? I would go ahead and divide by the 4. So negative 3 divided by 4. And then what? Square root. How many answers do you get when you square root? 2. Plus and minus the square root of 3/4 what? I. If you have a negative on the inside, then you need to take it out and make the negative. Is there anything we can simplify? Yeah, you can't take the square root of 3, but you can take the square root of 4, which is what? So that plus and minus really should be kind of in the middle, but it really doesn't matter. So plus and minus the square root of 3 over 2i. And the I can go in the front, doesn't really matter. Does that account for all 4 roots that this function should have because it has a power of 4? Yeah, the 1, the negative 2, and the plus and minus that. Okay, let's move on to 18. Find all zeros, state the multiplicity and the behavior at the x-axis, then sketch the graph. Okay, so quick question. Do you remember what it means to have a multiplicity of 1 versus 2 versus 3? Okay. All odd roots, if it has an odd multiplicity, it crosses straight through. If it has an even root, it bounces. And if it has an odd root higher than 1, it crosses, but it crosses how? With a curve, kind of with a wave, right? Okay. So any evens bounce, any odds cross, but anything higher than 1 crosses with a wave, right? So when you're looking at the zeros on this, just think about what makes this 0. What do you do with that 2? Bring it down right there. What's the opposite of positive 1/2? Negative 1/2 with a multiplicity of what? Yeah, I don't know why I wrote 3. I guess I was thinking about that. So negative 1/2, multiplicity of what? 3, which means it what? Crosses like that. Good. What about this one? Negative 4 with a multiplicity of 1. If it's not written, it's an understood 1, which means it what? Crosses straight through. This one is 8 with a multiplicity of 2, which means it bounces. And then the last one, 3 with a multiplicity of, which means it crosses straight through. Okay, my suggestion to you is to make, go ahead and label your zeros on the x-axis. So I've got negative 1/2. And right above it, what it's going to do, it's going to cross with a wave. Negative 4, we can just put over here. It's going to cross straight through. 8, I'm going to put right there. It's going to bounce. And 3 is going to cross straight through. How do I know where to start? Do I come from here or do I come from below? Do I know? How do you know? What's negative? Leading coefficient? Okay, so the leading coefficient is negative. I agree. But what else determines? Because I got 4 options. Remember my in behaviors? Up, up, down, down, up, down, down, up. I need to know the what? Degree. Yeah. How do you find the degree when you got something? Add up all the multiplicities, because if you multiplied all this out, it would be 8x cubed times another x times an x squared times an x. So basically, if I add up all the multiplicities, 3 plus 1 plus 2 plus 1, what would that be? 7? So the degree is 7, which is odd, right? If I have an odd function with a leading coefficient that's negative, then it goes in opposite directions, and in general it goes down. which means I need to start from where? I need to start from up top and end down below. So now we sketch. So you need to come from up here and cross straight through. It's easier if you go at a steep angle as opposed to sideways, but anyway. Go through right here, come back up. What do? Do I just go straight through it? Kind of curve. So give myself enough space to kind of, I almost didn't, to kind of curve through it. And then what? Go straight down through it. So create some max. I don't really care how high or how low your max goes. Cross straight through, and then what? Bounce. So give yourself enough space to create a max right there. And then there you go. Okay, we good? Okay. Now I told you to do the next problem right here, right? So what you're supposed to do is write a polynomial equation in standard form with the roots 2 plus 3i and the square root of 5. So my first question for you is, how many roots does this function have? I gave you how many? 1, 2. But technically there are 4. And you could say that I gave you, in fact, 4. Because if you've got one imaginary, you've got another imaginary, 2 minus 3i. And if you've got one root, you've got another, the negative square root of 5, right? So that is 4 roots. There's a ton of functions, there's infinitely many functions that can have those roots, but we're going to find the one of least degree, so just those. Do you remember what to write with those now? If I said the root was 3, then you would say the factor is x minus 3, right? So what we do is we subtract the root. The factor is x minus. Now, I'm going to write x minus 2 plus 3i and x minus 2 minus 3i. If I put parentheses around there, around the 2 minus 3i and the 2 plus 3i, you would distribute this negative right here. Either way, you're going to get one of them with a plus 3i and one of them with a negative 3i. But these are both negative. And they'll always be negative unless the number in front is positive. Okay? Whatever the root is, you subtract it. Okay? If it ends up being negative, then you subtract the negative and it becomes positive. Okay? So what are the other two? X minus the square root of 5 and x plus the square root of 5. You can think of it as x minus the negative square root of 5. But there we go. Okay, so what do? I start multiplying. I'm going to multiply the first two together because that makes the most sense, and then the last two. Now, if you remember the pattern, if you know how to do this, then you could come up with the answer pretty quickly. But if not, then, because the answer to that one is going to be x squared minus 4x, and then plus 13. Yeah, but we'll go ahead and find that out. X times x is x squared. X times negative 2. It's negative 2x, and x times negative 3i. Negative 3ix. Yeah? Now what do I distribute? Negative 2. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. I'm going to line it up with that one. Negative 2 times negative 2. Positive 4. It doesn't have one yet, so I'm going to go and one like it, so I'll put it over there. And negative 2 times negative 3i. Positive 6i. Okay. Now what? 3i? What's 3i times x? 3ix, which cancels those out. What's 3i times negative 2? Negative 6i, which cancels those out. And what is 3i times a negative 3i? Okay. Good. So 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. I times I is I squared. But I squared is what? Negative 1. So the negative times the negative makes it positive 9. So plus 9. So x squared minus 4x plus 13. And now we do the other one. x times x is what? X squared. Now you can multiply these out, but what's always going to happen in the middle terms when you have conjugate pairs? They're going to cancel out. X times the square root of 5 is the square root of 5x. A negative square root of 5 times x is a negative square root of 5x. And what is a negative square root of 5 times a positive square root of 5? Positive or negative? Negative times positive is negative. Square root of 5 times square root of 5 is square root of 25, which is what you all said, 5. So x squared minus 5. Are we done? We got to multiply those out, right? So if I multiply these out, I've got, let's see. Do you want to distribute all three of these or both of those? I don't really care. Those two? Okay. What's x squared times x squared? X to the what? 4th. What's x squared times 4x? Negative 4x. Okay, negative 4x cubed. X squared times 13? 13x squared. Now what do I distribute? Negative 5. Negative 5 times x squared. Negative 5 times negative 4x. 20x. And negative 5 times 13. Negative 65. 5 times 10 is 50, and 5 times 3 is 15, so 50 and 15 is 65. Final answer? A function with those roots is x to the 4th minus 4x cubed plus 8x squared plus 20x minus 65. Okay. Number 20 says, write a polynomial equation in standard form that contains the following roots. So what do? Same thing. So, how many roots does this function have? 4. I've got a 2i, so I've got a negative 2i, right? And then we've got 3 with a multiplicity of 2. So I'm going to write x plus 2i, x minus 2i, x what? Minus 3. How many times? Good. You can go ahead and write square, but I'm going to go ahead and write it out twice because I'm going to have to multiply it out. Okay. Let's multiply these. X times x is x squared. X times negative 2i.
Why do you do negative 7?
Because it's a positive 3. So if I have a positive 3 as my root, then x minus 3 is a factor. Because if I plug in 3 now, I'll get 0, right? And that's why they're called zeros. Okay, x, and then negative 2i times x, or positive 2i times x is positive 2ix. And 2i times negative 2i? What's 2i times negative 2i? Negative 4i squared, which makes it positive 4. So I've got x squared plus 4 times, now I need to multiply those out. X times x. Are these middle terms going to cancel out over here? No, because they're not different. X times x is x squared. X times negative 3. Negative 3x. Negative 3 times x is another negative 3x. Negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. X squared minus 6x plus 9. And then we just distribute, right? Again. X squared times x squared. I'm going to go x to the 4th. It's okay. X squared times negative 6x. Negative 6x cubed. X squared times 9. 9x squared. 4 times x squared. 4x squared. 4 times negative 6x. That's what I meant. Alright, 12. And 4 times 9. 36. Final answer? X to the 4th. Plus 36. There you go. A lot of this is just going to be a matter of remembering what to do, because you know what to do once you see it. It's just a matter of knowing what to do when you see the problem. Okay, so 21. We're going to try and fit 21 in right quick. Find all the roots for the following polynomial functions using the given roots. Do we have time? Well, I'm going to go ahead and start it and then finish it once, and when the bell rings, whatever, y'all can just leave. So, we're going to go ahead and divide out 3i from 2, 7, 14, 63, and negative 36. Why did I leave myself some space in this? Because those numbers are going to be a little bit annoying, right? Just because it's fun, and we know how, and we should be able to. So what do? What's 3i times 2? Can you combine 7 and 6i? So you just put 7 plus 6i. Okay, now we multiply 3i times 7 plus 6i. What's 3i times 7? 21i, so I'm going to put that there. And then 3i times 6i, I agree, is 18i squared, which makes it negative 18. You don't have to. If you put 21i minus 18, it's perfectly fine. What's 14 minus 18? Negative 4 plus 21i? Okay. So what is 3i times negative 4 plus 21i? Negative 12i. That's a 63i squared, right? 63i squared is negative 63. Bless you. What happens to the 63's? They cancel, so I'm just left with negative 12i. What is 3i times a negative 12i? A negative 36i squared, which makes it positive 36. Now what do? Right. Now I need to divide out negative 3i. Okay. Yes, the second one everything should be nice. Bring down the 2. What's 2 times negative 3i? Negative 6i. Those cancel. I've got 7. What is 7 times negative 3i? Negative 21i. Those cancel, so negative 4. What's negative 3i times negative 4? 12i. So I'm left with 0. What did I ask you to do? Find all the roots. I started with a power of 4. I divided out 2 roots, so I'm left with a power of 2. 2x squared plus 7x minus 4 equals 0. Do you want to factor it? What are the factors of negative 8 that add up to 7? Eight and negative 1, so x minus 1, x plus 8. What do you divide by? What do you divide by? 2. Divide by 2. So my other answers are positive 1/2 and negative 4. So that and x equals plus and minus 3i. Okay?